So the next step is you want to get connected to SAP. So it's like clicking your browser, opening it, and then typing in an address, right? Like Gmail or whatever. So the service that you want to connect to will be entered in the browser, right? So similarly, open the SAP GUI and click on this new icon. Click next. And this is the screen where you specify the address of the service or the server that you want to connect to. For example, I want to connect to an ECC server. So just name it as ECC, and the application server is the exact location that you want to connect to. For example, if you want to connect to Gmail, you connect mail.google.com, or if you want to connect to CNN, you say www.cnn.com, right? So if you want to connect to your SAP server, you can either use a domain or an IP address. Example, in my case, I'm going to connect to a domain, ecc6.domain.com. This is just an example. So your service provider is going to give you the exact IP address of the domain. And you have to enter an instance number, and that will be given by your provider. The ID will also be given by your provider. So you need to enter these three pieces: ID, number, and an address. Click next, next, and finish. This is the simplest way to connect to SAP. So click on login, you put your user ID here, and you put your password here. So that's my user ID and that's my password. Hit enter or click the green check mark. Okay, we are now logged on to SAP. Think of it, I don't want you to really understand everything about the SAP GUI at this point. As we start doing transactions, we'll start to know more about subtle things. Think of it like a browser. You move forward and backward in browser, right? You move forward in SAP GUI using transactions, and if you want to go back, there's a back button. The menu over here is very much like your Gmail list of links. We go to Gmail, and say click on circles, anything with a hierarchical menu. So under circles, I have my family, friends, acquaintances, and following. If I want to see my circle of friends, what do? I go to circles, and then inside that I click on friends, right? Simple. In the same way, if you want to look at a transaction, so this section here is called the menu path, and it's hierarchical, just like the way we have seen circles in Gmail. So if you want to execute a transaction, you got to first select what you're trying to do. Say if you want to create a purchase order, if you want to look at your circle of friends, you go to circles and then friends, right? So if you want to execute a purchase order, you want to go to logistics, material management, then go to purchasing, purchase order, and then create. So this is the transaction that you execute. It's just that there are more levels of hierarchy, nothing different. And don't worry about understanding all the levels right away. It's just not possible. You'll just see a pattern when you start doing things. Now if you go here, click on extras and click on settings, you'll see that each one of these transactions, for example, vendor supplying plan known for creation of purchase order, there is a technical name associated with that. It's also called as a transaction code. If you want to enable it, you go here and check on this option. So this is how you enable transaction codes or T codes. So check on that, click OK, and everything is going to collapse. And you start expanding the menu tree, and you're going to see the transaction codes. You see the transaction code here, ME21N. So the transaction to execute purchase order creation is ME21N. So this is an example of a transaction code or T code. So if you want to create a purchase order, there are two ways to do it. One is double click on this in the menu. The system will start to create the purchase order. You enter some details here. Another way to do the same thing is to go to this field over here. It's called the command field, and enter the transaction code there. What is the transaction code for this? ME21N, right? So this window is where you're going to enter the transaction code. I'm going to enter ME21N here. Put your cursor there, type in ME21N, hit OK. The same thing, right? You're again taken to the purchase order screen. So two ways to execute a transaction, one via the menu path and another via the transaction code. If you keep continuing to use the transaction again and again and again, you can drag the transaction to the favorites section. There are some other things that you need to know about the GUI, but we can learn about them as we go through the rest of the classes. Now we are going to talk about the purchasing life cycle. I'm going to open this coffee shop, and right next to it I'm going to have a factory. I use this to make and store goods. I need this to run my coffee shop. I need some simple stuff like coffee beans, flour, sugar, and stuff like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find a vendor who can deliver this stuff for me. So I'm going to go to Google, find out who the nearest vendor is. Say call him ABC Goods or ABC Foods, and I'm going to call him over the phone and say, I need flour, say 100 pounds. I need sugar, say 50 pounds. And I need coffee beans, say 20 pounds to start with. So this vendor is going to take some time to deliver the goods. Say in 5 days, he's going to deliver the goods. He's going to deliver flour, sugar, and coffee beans. in the respective quantities. And somebody in the stores is gonna receive them. And store it somewhere in the location. A couple of days later, he sends us a request. And that request is for payment. It's going to say, okay, bill number 23205, just some number, and it's going to say flour 100 pounds, and say 1 pound costs $1, so that's $100. And sugar is 50 pounds, and 1 pound costs say $2, so that's $100. And coffee beans is 20 pounds, and each pound say costs $4. It's going to be 80. So this is at the rate of $1 per pound. This is at the rate of $2 per pound. And this is at the rate of $4 per pound. Right? And the total here is going to be 280. And say there is a tax of 10%, sales tax. That's going to be 28. And the total is going to be $308. That's what we should be paying this vendor. Again, this comes as a paper invoice or an email, and it comes to my address. And that's the request for payment. So I have some time to clear this invoice. As soon as it's sent, say this is sent on Jan 5th, this was sent on say January 1st, this came in on January 5th, and say this came on January 6th. Now, I have some time to pay this invoice. I don't need to pay it immediately. So I have some time. I take my time, and maybe on Jan, say 25th, I pay this invoice. So what we are doing is basically sending a check or cash for $308. So let's see what's happening here. So there are 4 steps that happened here. First step is called, this step here is called purchase order. The second step is called goods receipt, because you are receiving the goods into the warehouse. The third step is called invoice receipt. You receive the goods and now you receive the invoice. The final step is payment. Step number 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the basic life cycle of a purchase order. There is a purchase order that goes out to the vendor sends the goods, the vendor also sends the invoice, and we pay the vendor. So how does my week look like? So I am here, this is my vendor, and on Jan 1st I place an order, a purchase order, also called a PO. Jan 2nd week I could place another order, my second order. This could be for something else. Maybe I need more flour, more coffee beans. On Jan 3rd I place my third purchase order. Say on Jan 10th I receive some goods, and that's related to the first POC. On Jan 12th I receive goods for the second PO. Jan 14th I receive the invoice or bill. Invoice is just a fancy word for bill. For the first PO, and so on and on and on. These set of activities, sending out a purchase order, receiving goods, receiving invoices, and me sending out payments, keep going on and on and on. Say after 6 months, I want to find out how profitable I am. So I want to understand, say, how much I have spent in total. So total spent. I also want to understand the total stock on hand. I want to understand the totals spent or paid per month, meaning how much I spent in the month of January, how much I spent in the month of February, March, so on and so forth. How would I know that? It's all in your mind, meaning in my mind, maybe in some piece of paper somewhere the vendor has sent. How would I track the totals and summarize what's my financial situation? How do I solve this problem? I need to document things. Need to document. Unless I document all the different processes that are happening every day, I wouldn't be able to track things. And and make any meaningful analysis out of it. So here is what I'm gonna do. I am gonna buy 4 different file folders. 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first file is gonna be called a PO file. The second file is called receipts. The third file is called invoices. The fourth file is called payments. Remember, we had just 4 different processes. On week 1, say on Jan 1st, I sent a PO, and I'm going to take a printout of the PO that I sent and file it in this folder. It's going to say I'm sending a PO to this vendor ABC Goods or ABC Foods for so much of flour, so much of coffee beans, so much of sugar. The expected price is say $200. And on Jan 2nd, the second PO, first PO, second PO, and on Jan 10th, I get a receipt. The vendor is going to send the receipt, right? This is going to be similar to how Amazon sends you a shipping label. So that comes along with your package, right? So it says here are your products and these are the quantities. I'm going to file it in the receipts folder. Number 1. And on Jan 10th or 12th, say, I get an invoice, file it here, the first invoice. On Jan 25th, I do a payment. I put it here. That's it. My problem is solved, right? What is the problem that I solved here? I just documented all the activities that I've been doing. Just put them in separate folders. Well, let's talk about the problem that we had. If I wanted to find out how much, say, coffee beans I ordered last month, can I answer that quickly? Yes. All I have to do is go to this file, pick up all the purchase orders that I have sent to the vendor, create in the last month, sum it up, and look for the coffee bean items, add them together. Right? Another question. How much outstanding payment do I need to provide to the vendor as of today? Can I answer that? Of course. Just go to all the invoices. Any invoice paid to this vendor is going to be marked as paid, right? So this invoice is paid, this invoice is paid, this one is paid. Billing and invoicing is the same. These are two different terms. That's it. How about another question? How much coffee beans did we receive last month, say? Easy, right? Go to receipts, find out all the receipts that have been filed, look at all the coffee bean items, quantities and prices, sum them up, and we have the answer. So what did we do here? We documented things, and through the process of documenting, we are able to answer so many different questions, right? And what I'm going to do at the year end is take my files, PO files, receipts, invoices, and payments. I take them to my accountant, ask him to log them, consolidate them, and finally he prepares the profit and loss statement, which is a fancy word for how much I made and lost, of course, in that year, and what stocks do I have, and finally prepares a tax statement, and that is going to be filed as a tax return. Simple, right? I've completed 1 year of business, prepared a P&L, filed the tax return, and everything is in order. Well, this will work for small companies. If I am running the show, this will work perfectly fine. But what if I expand from one store to multiple stores? This is store 1. The next year I make some profits, I'm going to open another store. Can I keep filing papers and folders and keep doing the same business? Well, let's see. So I open my second coffee shop, and I can be at both places, right? I have a manager here. So he or she is going to take care of the stuff in store 2, and I'm going to take care of the stuff in store 1. And we repeat the process again. We have folders here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. One for store 1, and another set of folders for store 2. So this manager, say, does not understand purchasing. So whenever there is a requirement for flour or sugar, he tells me, and I am going to act on it. Meaning I'm going to place a PO, get the goods, and he's going to tell me how much is in stock. Just like store 1 has a factory to produce and store goods, store 2 is also going to have a factory. How would I know what is the stock situation in store 2's factory? How would I know goods consumption, meaning how much coffee is being consumed, how much flour is being consumed, how much goods are being created. I won't know unless I go to store 2. If store 2 is just nearby, I can just go there and then get the picture. Imagine store 2, store 3, store 4, store 5. I cannot be everywhere. I need some kind of a system that gives me a picture of the stock situation in any store that I own. How do you solve that problem? We need some kind of a centralized software. So there's going to be some kind of a computer, maybe in one of the main stores, that every store manager, this is store 1, we have store 2, store 3, everybody should be able to log in to my server just like you log into Gmail and access it from anywhere, right? So each of the store managers should be able to log into the server and update the stock situation, like how much of stock is there at hand and what has been delivered. So for example, if anytime I want to know what is the stock situation in store 2, I should be able to know it. Just go look up store 2, maybe there's a separate folder for that on the server, and get an idea. This is the centralized software that we're trying to learn here. Very simple. Think of this as SAP. I know it doesn't make sense to do SAP for 3 stores. But imagine Starbucks. It has thousands of stores and it's just an extension. 1 store, 2 store, 3 store, 100 stores, 1,000 stores. They are going to have some kind of an ERP. And we are going to learn SAP with just 3 stores or 2 stores.